So something happens to almost everyone who enters the system, and it happens so quietly that 99% of people never even realize the trap has been sprung. You sit in a university lecture hall, maybe studying how to market products or analyze consumer behavior, and you are handed a script. Get the degree, sign the employment contract, enter the middle class. Work hard, save what's left at the end of the month, upgrade your lifestyle when you get a promotion, and eventually, decades from now, you will be financially secure. Through every single financial crisis, through inflation, through corporate layoffs, the advice remains identical. Stay loyal, keep your head down, rely on the salary, and trust the process. That formula is the engine that builds wealth. But it doesn't build your wealth. It builds the wealth of the corporations you work for, the banks that issue your credit cards, and the institutions that hold your mortgage. The system you are participating in is not broken. It is functioning exactly as it was designed. It is an engineered psychological architecture designed to extract your most valuable asset, your time, and convert it into a predictable cash flow for someone else. It is a closed loop, the poverty loop, and the response from the average person to this loop reveals something that no amount of hard work will ever fix. They think like employees. When you understand the behavioral evidence, the lifestyle inflation, the silent accumulation of consumer debt, the terror of missing a single paycheck, you'll understand that what's keeping you broke is not your boss, and it's not the economy. It is your habits. It is the rules you follow that the wealthy systematically ignore in silence. When you hear what the smartest money on earth knows about the psychology of the first $20,000, you'll understand why the wealthiest people never sell their time. They buy it. Let me start with the psychology of the paycheck, because understanding what a salary actually is explains everything about why you feel stuck. A salary is not a reward for your value. A salary is the exact minimum mathematical calculation a company has run to determine what it takes to stop you from quitting, while extracting the maximum amount of excess value from your labor. It is a localized sedative. It is designed to be just high enough to make you comfortable, and just low enough to keep you terrified of losing it. The wealthy do not view salaries as wealth. They view them as starting capital. But the middle class views the salary as the finish line. This fundamental misunderstanding creates a behavioral cascade. When you think like an employee, your entire financial life is defensive. You operate from a state of perpetual vulnerability. If your laptop overheats and breaks, it's an emergency. If your rent goes up, it's a crisis. You are constantly one bad month away from financial ruin, which means you can never take the calculated risks required to actually build capital. You are forced to make decisions out of fear. You cannot negotiate hard for a raise because you need the check next Friday. You cannot walk away from a toxic environment to start building your own assets, because your survival is tied to that desk. The system has you completely cornered, and the bars of this cage are forged by your own daily habits. The daily coffee, the car financing, the subscription models, these are not treats. They are systematic drains on your liquidity, ensuring that at the end of the month, your balance always returns to zero. The system demands that your money is always in motion, flowing away from you. But there is a breaking point, a specific mathematical threshold where the physics of the trap stop working. It's a number most people brush off: $20,000. Not a million, not a massive trust fund. $20,000 of pure, highly liquid, untouchable cash. Here's what you need to understand about this specific number in a personal finance context, because it's doing far more psychological work than most people realize. The wealthy don't respect $20,000 because it's a lot of money to buy things with. They respect it because it is the exact price of psychological freedom. When a person who has lived paycheck to paycheck their entire life finally accumulates a genuine $20,000 cash buffer, a structural shift happens in their brain. The fear evaporates. Think about the behavioral shift. When you have $0 in the bank, your time horizon is 24 hours. You are thinking about tomorrow's bills. When you have $20,000 in the bank, your time horizon expands to 6 months. You stop reacting, and you start planning. If an unexpected expense hits, it's no longer a catastrophe. It's just a minor logistical annoyance. It's an invoice you pay from cash flow. If your boss threatens your job, the panic response doesn't trigger. You look at them and realize, I don't actually need you tomorrow. I have half a year of runway. That silence, that absence of panic, is the most dangerous thing in the world to the system. When you stop operating out of fear, you stop acting like an employee. You start acting like an investor. You start looking at your 9 to 5 not as a master, but as a client. And when you treat your employer like a client, the power dynamic inverts. You start demanding a higher return on your time. You start quietly building assets on the side. The system is mathematically designed to prevent you from ever reaching this threshold. It hits you with targeted advertising, peer pressure, and inflationary consumer goods to ensure you surrender your surplus capital. Reaching that first $20,000 is not a financial milestone. It is an act of violent rebellion against the poverty loop. If the goal is to hoard that first $20,000 to buy your psychological freedom, we have to look at the exact mechanisms designed to stop you from getting there. The middle class doesn't stay poor because they don't make enough money. They stay poor because they misunderstand the difference between an asset and an obligation. They fall for a series of consumer traps dressed up as milestones of success. The first trap is the illusion of the upgrade. Society tells you that when your income increases, your standard of living must immediately rise to meet it. You land a solid internship or get a promotion, so you immediately go out and finance a new car or buy expensive clothes. You are trading your future hours, your future freedom, for depreciating items that lose value the second you purchase them. The entire modern economy is a machine engineered by brilliant digital marketing campaigns to put the right ad on the right screen at the exact right moment, to create artificial scarcity and drain your liquidity. They sell you convenience, they sell you status. But what they are actually doing is extracting your capital before it has a chance to compound. The second trap is the failure to properly value your own time. When you accept a salary that barely covers inflation, you are running a terrible trade with absolutely no safety net. You need to look at your personal finances the exact same way a ruthless institutional investor looks at a chart. You have to understand the brutal mathematics of P&L. What is your personal profit and loss at the end of every single month? If your P&L is negative, or if you are just breaking even while the corporation extracts all the surplus value of your labor, you are on the losing side of the trade. You have to execute a strict stop-loss on your bad habits and cut the position. This is where the psychological shift must occur. You have to stop thinking like an employee who sells time and start thinking like a business that acquires assets. An employee looks at a free weekend and sees an opportunity to rest, consume entertainment, and spend money. They are the target audience. An investor looks at a free weekend and sees 48 hours of unallocated capital. They see a window to build a system that will eventually replace their salary. The transition involves taking whatever specialized knowledge you have and monetizing it outside the corporate structure. If you have spent a couple of years building experience as an online or offline tutor, Exchanging your hours for a flat fee, you have hit an income ceiling. The goal is to take that knowledge and detach it from your physical presence. You productize it. You reverse the funnel. Instead of being the consumer at the bottom of the algorithm, you become the producer at the top of it. You build the asset. When you have the employee mindset, you believe that working harder for your boss will make you rich. It won't. It will only make you tired, and it will make your boss richer. The secret is that the wealthy never trade their time for a flat fee unless that fee is immediately being aggressively deployed into an asset that works while they sleep. So, how do you actually execute this? How do you break the loop and stack that first $20,000 in cash? It requires a level of brutal, systematic discipline that most people are simply too weak to endure. Building this cash buffer requires the exact same physiological discipline as building a heavily muscled physique. You do not get a strong body by occasionally going to the gym when you feel motivated. You get it through consistent, painful, calculated repetition. You do not gain control of your metabolism by eating whenever an ad shows you a picture of junk food. You restrict your consumption. You practice intermittent fasting. You literally starve the body's dependence on constant, cheap inputs to force it to burn its own stored fat, restricting your window strictly from 8 p.m. until 12 noon the next day. It is time to apply that exact same intermittent fasting to your capital. You must restrict your spending window. You must initiate a financial fast. For the next 12 months, you starve the consumer impulses to feed the asset column. You cut the subscriptions. You stop eating in restaurants. You stop buying things to impress people who are just as broke as you are. You calculate your exact baseline survival burn rate, rent, basic groceries, utilities, and you ruthlessly eliminate every single expense that sits above that line. The pain you feel in the first 3 months of this financial fast is the feeling of the employee conditioning leaving your system. It is supposed to hurt. If it doesn't hurt, your P&L isn't changing. Once you plug the leaks, every single extra dollar gets aggressively swept into a high-yield account that you do not touch. You do not look at it. You let the pressure build. You hold the line until you hit $20,000. And when you do, you will wake up one morning and realize you are no longer a hostage. You have the seed. Now, the real game begins. The middle class fails here because they view that $20,000 as a trophy. They look for a way to spend it to reward themselves. The wealthy view that $20,000 as a seed crop, and you do not eat your seed crop. To transition from the employee mindset to the owner class, you must adopt the rules that the wealthy use to deploy their capital in absolute silence. Rule number 1. Stop announcing your ascent. The middle-class habit is projection. The moment they accumulate a tiny bit of capital, they immediately convert it into status signals to impress people who do not care about them. True wealth is entirely silent. The goal is not to look rich. Looking rich is a trap that guarantees you will remain poor. The goal is to be free. Freedom does not require an audience. Rule number 2. Reverse the marketing funnel. You might be sitting in a university right now, majoring in digital marketing. You might be learning how to run a comprehensive social media marketing plan, how to structure a TVC for a massive consumer brand, or how to leverage influencer marketing to push a new product. You understand exactly the psychology of how corporations extract attention and capital from the masses. Yet, you go home and fall for the exact same tricks. You must reverse the funnel. Stop being the consumer at the bottom of the algorithm. Use your understanding of digital ecosystems to build your own distribution. The wealthy do not consume media. They produce it. Rule number 3. Build a miniature landscape. Think of your wealth like a closed ecosystem, a perfectly constructed terrarium where you control the soil, the moisture, and the light. In the beginning, it is fragile. If you introduce a toxic element, bad debt, a depreciating asset, a liability masked as a luxury, the ecosystem dies. The wealthy build their financial lives in isolation from middle-class expectations. They control the inputs. They seal the environment until it is self-sustaining. Only when the ecosystem generates its own excess oxygen do they allow themselves to breathe it. Rule number 4. Leverage asymmetric arbitrage. The world often looks completely absurd, like a twisted version of Alice in Wonderland, where the rules don't make sense to the working class. But underneath the absurdity, there are ironclad business principles. The wealthy look for opportunities where the downside is strictly capped, but the upside is mathematically infinite. When you dedicate time to mastering a complex language like Chinese, or when you push your English skills to a high academic level, you are not just preparing to pass a test. With a sharp mind, you are building an asymmetric bridge. You are giving yourself the ability to arbitrage information and negotiate deals across borders that 99% of your peers are blind to. You have the $20,000. The fear is gone. Now the clock starts. If you leave that money sitting in a standard savings account, inflation will slowly bleed it to death. You have a 12-month window to take that seed money and plant it into a system that generates a secondary cash flow. Here is the exact 4-phase blueprint to buy your permanent freedom. Phase 1. Reverse engineering attention. In the first 90 days, you do not spend a single dollar. You spend your time studying the absolute extremes of media and psychology. Look at the most vicious, high-stakes arenas of human attention. Study the architecture of political debate narratives. Watch how a message is crafted, how an us versus them dynamic is established, and how a dedicated channel can mobilize millions of people based purely on narrative framing. Politics is the highest form of marketing. Then, look at the opposite end of the spectrum, pure biological retention. Study the mechanics of cinematic 8K audio-visual content. Understand how perfectly engineered sensory triggers, like hyper-detailed sound design, can lock a viewer into a screen for 40 minutes. You are looking at the source code of human behavior. You are learning how to hook the brain on both an intellectual and a biological level. Phase 2. The 6-week prototype sprint. By month 4, you build the vehicle to monetize that attention. The amateur spends 2 years perfecting a product in secret, launches it to zero audience, and loses everything. The professional gives themselves a strict 4 to 6 week timeline to deploy a minimum viable product. It does not matter if your product is a highly conceptual tarot deck of cards that blends business archetypes with surreal themes, or if you are selling high-end, self-contained miniature landscapes. You take a calculated fraction of your capital and you run the ads. You test the messaging. If the market rejects it, you pivot. You keep running sprints until the market pulls the product out of your hands. Phase 3. Infrastructure and leverage. By month 7, you have a product that converts. Now, you must scale it. This is where you deploy the heavy capital. You pay for distribution. Simultaneously, you must ruthlessly eliminate your operational bottlenecks. If your hardware is overheating when you try to render high-fidelity video files or run heavy analytics, you fix the machine. You do not let a depreciating, faulty laptop slow down your compounding just because the warranty is about to expire. You upgrade your infrastructure so that your systems can run at maximum efficiency without you constantly managing them. Phase 4. The equity shift. By the final quarter of the year, the mathematics of your life will fundamentally change. Your secondary cash flow should now be covering your baseline survival expenses. When your side asset pays for your survival, your salary becomes pure, 100% disposable capital. You are no longer working to live, you are working to acquire more assets. You can walk into an office and demand equity, or simply walk away and scale your own enterprise full-time. The poverty loop is not a physical prison. It is a psychological one. It is maintained by a system that wants you tired, distracted, and desperately waiting for the next paycheck. But once you cross that $20,000 threshold, the illusion shatters. You look at the corporate ladder and realize it has been leaning against the wrong wall your entire life. You stop asking for permission to survive, and you start building the infrastructure to conquer. If this exposed a trap you didn't even realize you were standing in, and if you are ready to execute the stop-loss on your current financial trajectory, write, "I see the trap," in the comments below. The wealthy operate in silence, but they recognize each other by their results. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stop selling your time. I'll see you in the next video.